Lambton Heritage Museum's Lambton Gallery is being redesigned. The entire space will have a new look and different objects will be on display. This series of videos looks back on a few of the highlights. Today we're talking to Robert Tremain, who was curator at Lambton Heritage Museum for about 39 years.
So could you tell us about some of the most interesting items in this case?
Most of these items were collected by Clifford Lucas from Watford. He was a kind of a Lambton County historian, and because Clifford lived to the advanced age of 100 plus, he had a wealth of knowledge and was sharp right to the very end. So he was a really favorite donor for us. He gathered all of these pieces, or most of them, and the stories associated with them came down to us through Clifford. So there's some really outstanding lithic pieces. There are stone tools here. Stone tools were important and they were inherited from generation to generation because stone tools took an incredible amount of skill and work to fashion. So there's some remarkable finds here that Clifford came up with. One is a Chalcedony Point. It's called a great man's spear. This is thought to be not so much a functional blade, but made as a ceremonial burial piece and buried with a chief or somebody who would be prominent in the tribe. And this kind of tool, we've had archaeologists look at it, not so much a tool, but a ceremonial piece. We know that this stone isn't the local Kettle Point church and that it comes from the Ohio area. And as I said, it's referred to as Chalcedony. And so this style of point comes from the Hopewellian culture in Ohio. That's the mountain cultures, and these people lived 2,500 to 3,500 years ago. So it's a great find, and it comes out of a sand dune in Southcott Pines in Grand Bend. So within very few miles of here, it was buried. I also want to talk about this piece because it's very unusual. Museums like to collect objects that tell stories. And very few objects in the museum collection at the Lambton Heritage Museum can tell a story that spans literally millions of years and touches on two human cultures at widely different points of time. But this one does. So let me explain. This is the outside of a kettle, concretion from Kettle Point. These concretions are about 385 million years ago. Geologists tell us that that's when they were formed. And when they were brought to the surface by wave action and erosion at Kettle Point, they don't last very much longer. So they split by frost action into halves and quarters and pieces that are triangular like this. And at some point in its past, somebody looked at this and thought, well, I can make a tool out of that. So all of this part up here has been ground and polished to make a kind of a beak for nuts. And so this is what's called an anvil, a nut cracking anvil. And you can see the little indents here where somebody could line up either acorns or a hazelnut or a beech nut and put them in there. You would never strike this anvil with another stone tool, like some anvils are made for cracking flint cores, but you would never strike this with other than a wooden limb or a wood mallet and crack the nuts open here. So this would be a really important tool and a favorite tool, I'm sure, for somebody. And we know from the work of Dr. Jury that Port Frank's had at least 50 flint working seasonal workshops. The Attawandaron people in Western Ontario didn't live in Lambton County, but they came here every year, year after year, Huron shoreline and to do things like making stone tools from the chert at Kettle Point, or obviously cracking nuts. But they had a problem with this. This piece is so heavy that at the end of every season, instead of carrying it back to their longhouse villages on, say, the Thames River near London, they would probably secret this away by burying it in sand. And so sometime around 1650, the Adwandron they become culturally extinct. They were wiped out by tribal warfares and then they're assimilated into other Iroquois tribes. So there's none of them left. And so our buried Anvil just quietly sat there in a sand dune at the end of one of the years, somewhere around 1650. And so there it sat from 1910 until the catalog number tells us 1989, when I had the honor of visiting Clifford and he showed me through all of his treasures. And when I was leaving the front porch area of his house where he kept all of his native pieces, I said, well, what's that? And he said, well, it's a doorstop. And so we talked about it, and he said, it's a really interesting doorstop. And so we had a cultural anthropologist look at this, and in archaeological terms, it would be an anvil, considered an anvil, or a nutcracking tool. So that's how a 385 million year old kettle becomes a nutcracker, and ultimately becomes the doorstop, and a very prized museum possession.
Well, thank you so much for being with us here today and for sharing some of your knowledge about these interesting artifacts.
Well, thank you.